These are going to be 5 of the worst ingredients commonly found in popular pet foods, according to experts. Go get your dog's bag of food, look at the back of the bag at the ingredients, and see if your dog's food has any of these. I will be sharing the things that I look for, especially some of my favorite pet foods. Starting with one of the most controversial ingredients, it's one of the biggest red flags according to veterinarians, scientists, and nutritionists that I learned from, and that is anything that includes a meal ingredient. But there is a caveat to that. The biggest red flag are unnamed meat meals. For example, meat meal, or when the ingredients include poultry or beef byproduct meal. By definition, according to the FDA, meal ingredients are rendered, and per the FDA, meal rendered ingredients can, not always, we'll talk about that, include 4D low quality meats, dead, deceased, dying, essentially feed grade ingredients that are unfit for human consumption. A meat meal is essentially the moisture removed out of the byproduct left over after slaughter. So it's like the leftover remaining parts, the offal, the beaks, the feathers of the animal that normally humans wouldn't eat. And those are ground up and ultra processed into a fine powder. Many manufacturers will try to tell us that meal ingredients, because the moisture is removed and it is such a refined product, that the nutrients and the protein amount will be higher. And while that may be true, the bioavailability of that is questionable by many experts. And the reason is because it has gone through so many rounds of processing to make it into this powder. Then you may ask, Rachel, should I avoid all meal ingredients? And that is honestly something that you'll have to decide. How I look at it is if there's a byproduct meal, or if there is an unnamed meat where it's just meat meal, that is something I personally avoid. Now, one that I may consider based on deep research, which I know a lot of us don't have time to do, is if my dog's food has a named meal, let's call it beef meal or chicken meal, if I can get in writing from the manufacturer, and not just anybody, it needs to be a decision maker, a formulator, a veterinary formulator on the staff, a founder, a co-founder, that chicken meal or that salmon meal is in fact from non-4D feed grade ingredients, then I am much more open to consider that as part of the ingredient panel. But that is going to be all dependent on what the other ingredients look like, what the sourcing of the other ingredients look like, as well as the guaranteed analysis, which I'll go, if you want me to go more in depth on that, leave a comment below. Now, before I talk about an ingredient that gets me so heated because it's in so many pet foods and is also used at Lowe's and Home Depot as a pesticide, I want to first talk about something that irritates me, but not as much anger, and that is coloring. A lot of times we're going to see artificial colors like caramel coloring. Think about why they would do that. Our dogs don't see color in the way that we do, so they're doing that to appeal to you and I. And for me, a lot of times when I'm looking at ingredients or additives in a food, it's not just the one single ingredient that they're adding. For example, many people get really upset about rice. In my opinion, and based on Chinese medicine, rice inherently isn't bad, but what I get frustrated with are the intentions behind the ingredients, and that's what gets me. And when a brand or manufacturer adds in a coloring to a food, let's say caramel color, for example, they're trying to appeal to you and I, and what's best for the dog, what's healthiest for the dog, it becomes second at that point, and that's where I get frustrated. I also get frustrated because these can be highly irritating to our dogs, to their gut system. And this is something I've learned from dozens and dozens of veterinarians that deal with pet sensitivities and allergies. If you want to see my vet chat series, I'll talk about that and link it at the end, where I bring on professionals in the community that can talk to these topics. For example, the FDA allows natural coloring to include carmine, which is made from insects, caramel color, which is made from sugar and acid. Instead, if a brand wants to add some color to the food, why not use something like beta carotene, carrots or sweet potato, for example, or beets. Beets give a nice rich color without adding anything toxic or potentially harmful. Okay, now we're going to talk about corn gluten meal. This is highly common in some of the most premium brands, and this is something that if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot and you look at pesticides, guess what many of them will use? cornmeal, corn gluten meal. Why would we feed that to our animals? Well, if we look at the protein amount in a corn gluten meal, it is relatively high. And brands know that when informed pet parents like you and I look at the back of the bag at the guaranteed analysis and we see that protein percent, we want on a kibble for that to be at least 27, 28% or higher. But what is the most expensive ingredient in kibble? Meat. What is the most important ingredient for our dogs? Meat. What's most important is the percent of protein from meat, animal meat. That is what is species appropriate for our dogs. Based on research, and I'll put a study in the description, dogs are facultative or scavenging carnivores. It doesn't mean they only need meat and organs and crushed raw bone in their diet, but it does mean that that should ideally be most of their diet in a complete and balanced form. And this riles me up so much because corn gluten meal is also very inexpensive to produce, which, by the way, corn gluten meal is a registered biopesticide according to the EPA. Next, we're going into preservatives. That would include BHA, BHT. We often see these in milk bones. I'm not here to bash any brands. Again, this is my personal opinion based on what I've learned from experts in the field, which you can watch that as well, because everything I learn, I've been sharing with you for years and years, and that's why you click subscribe. But BHA and BHT are widely accepted to be carcinogenic and to cause potential GI upset in our dogs, and it's something that I don't know a single veterinarian would be comfortable recommending. And there's active research going on right now about the link of BHA and BHT to lung, kidney, and liver cancer. So again, I personally would stay away from it. And now this next one is especially important if your dog has a protein sensitivity or any food allergies, because it's a very common ingredient in most or majority of pet kibbles, and that is natural flavors. And the reason this is a highly controversial ingredient is because according to the FDA, it can include a number of things that you as the informed pet parent don't know. For example, it could include almost any protein flavor. It could be beef or fish or turkey or chicken. So let's say you buy a bag of beef for your dog because your dog has a chicken sensitivity or chicken allergy. If it has natural flavoring listed on there, there could be a little bit of chicken in that beef bag of food, and you would never know unless you ask the brand directly. It can also include bark, leaf, essential oils, among many other things to change the flavor of the food. And my big question is, why do we need to add flavoring to our dog's food? If we're using species and biologically appropriate ingredients in our food and we're using healthy ingredients, our dog should want to eat that naturally, instinctually. Why would we need to try to change the flavor profile? That's just a question I have. And I'm not anti all natural flavor used in foods, but I will need to get in writing from the manufacturer, which I share all of that research with you. Go to my website, linked below, RachelFusaro.com. What is exactly included in that natural flavoring? If they can put that in writing for me from a decision maker, then I am much more comfortable with feeding that food to my dogs. Now let's talk about foods that I do like. I am a fresh food feeder, meaning I feed gently cooked or raw food diet or DIY homemade diet to my dogs, but it took me a long time to get here. So let me make this known. I am not anti-kibble by any means. In fact, I am a huge advocate of feeding the best kibble that you can feed, which all of my favorite dog foods in every category are on my free dog food list, which you can find linked down below. And I give you the pros, the cons, all of the research I've done on that food so that you can make an informed decision. I never will sit here and tell you this is the best food for your dog, because every dog is different and you should always work with a veterinarian. I also am now offering veterinarian appointments on my website, telehealth, so you can get customized and personalized support based on your individual dog. Again, it'll all be on my website, RachelFusaro.com, linked in the description. But I personally feed a fresher diet, and I rotate the brands, and I rotate sometimes making my own food. I do this because I don't want my dogs to get a protein sensitivity, and by feeding the same food over and over again, they could become more susceptible to that. And I also am not married to any one brand, because at the end of the day, these guys, they're number one. No brand is number one, even if they offer me a ton of money, which they do sometimes. But you know me, my opinion can never be bought. So I may love a brand today, but real time, if there's a change made that I'm not comfortable with, absolutely they get removed from my list. I won't feed it to my dog, and I will share what I learned with you. And speaking of homemade dog food, click the video right here and I will show you a very easy DIY recipe you can try with your dog, or click the video right here to learn from a veterinarian on the best foods to feed our dogs. And I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.